came to Hong Kong with, and I think Zaha said at the time, why you're still in Guangzhou, why you're not in Hong Kong. Very exciting. I think what was happening in China at the time. The time for China, at least, because that was the biggest project anyone could have ever, would have dreamt of. For us, I think it's been a success story. It still is a success story. There's a fascinating mystery about the work and the designs. Just sort of like, some people talk about Zaha, about breaking barriers. It's not so much about breaking barriers. It's more about blurring, between one thing and another. I would like to see sort of workshops, a bit like the ones that you see in sort of Copenhagen, the institutions that are funded by, by the state. You've got 4 different floors. I've mentioned this to people as well. You've got different floors, and you've got an entire floor dedicated to wood workshops, ceramics, metals, textiles, and it's open to whoever's interested to, from students down to professionals. And that's the thing that's kind of drives the ecosystem in Italy, in Japan. The designers, sellers, fabricators, they work together. But it would be nice to see a bit more of this sort of spaces for people as well, for production and also for creatives as well.
Welcome to the last meeting of the week, Simon. This is nice.
Pleasure.
We've got out of the last 4 episodes, we've cracked beers in 3 of them, which is normally is a very high rate.
Shouldn't be endorsing them though.
Spanish beer, very light.
Product endorsement.
I mean, that's the condition because they are actually our sponsor.
Oh.
So,
fair enough.
So yes. we can show the logo. Thank you, Borja, for keeping on believing in us. How was the week, Simon?
All right. Up and down. Yeah. Generally okay. Yeah. Usual.
Is this your last meeting of the week as well, or do you have something to do after this?
Probably not. I think probably might have something after this.
Fun or work related?
Maybe work in peace.
Oh wow!
Without the phone, or just at home,
Nice. I like those moments.
Yeah.
But I get too tired to Friday afternoon.
But it is Friday night, so let's see.
Okay.
It might change.
Okay. I was very surprised. I have a question.
Yes.
Have you really been in? Just for the audience, for whoever don't know you, Simon Yu is director of Zaha Hadid in Hong Kong, and your LinkedIn tells me that you've been there almost 30 years.
That's right.
Is that correct?
No, when I first started, it would have been, I think that would have been October. So October this year will be a 30 years anniversary.
Wow.
From when I first joined, but I was still a student then.
Wow. So.
But, yeah.
And then you've done all your career there, or?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Majority. Yeah. I did break out a little bit, had a stint, but, not particularly successful. But, yeah. And then, of course, there were some, big opportunities, at Zaha's. And also it was just something that, it was a sort of almost an emotional thing for me as well. It was one of those places that I really enjoyed.
You started in Hong Kong, or you started elsewhere?
So my story is, I was born in Scotland.
Okay.
Actually, so I'm Scottish. My parents are from Hong Kong. I'm from my parents, so there is that link with Hong Kong. So I was born there, and until the age of 5, I'd come to Hong Kong, or come back to Hong Kong, so to speak, and I went to nursery and primary school for about 2.5 years, and then went back to Scotland. And the whole point of that was just to learn a bit of Chinese, Cantonese.
And what's bigger in you, the Scottish or the Cantonese? Personality-wise?
I think almost neither.
Okay.
So I think in both.
Okay.
It depends on context. So I've spent, right now it's almost half and half because I've been here almost, I've been back here almost like 20 years now, almost.
Okay.
So I think about almost 20 years ago, I went to China for a short trip, for a 2-week trip.
Put this a little bit closer to you.
For a 2-week trip.
Yes.
And that was it's quite threatening, isn't it?
Don't feel afraid.
And that was about that was 20 years ago. So that was supposed to be a 2-week trip, and I'm still here.
Wow.
So that's what happened. I think it's the typical expat kind of story. They come for a visit or they plan something short, and then they just end up staying here for a long duration. So so I was in Guangzhou for back in sort of, I think, Christmas of 2004. 2004, and then it was a 2-week trip, and within those 2 weeks, it was very tumultuous. It was meeting with a lot of government officials. And met the party secretary in the first week. I didn't know what a party secretary was. I thought it was some kind of secretary, really. But it turns out, he was bigger than the mayor. And and that was my sort of introduction to China. And I'd stayed there for about 6-7 years, worked on a project there, and then came to Hong Kong with, and I think Zaha said at the time, why are you still in Guangzhou? Why are you not in Hong Kong? We had an office in Hamburg. Why do you have an office in Hamburg and not in Berlin? So it made sense at the time. So we moved to Hong Kong, and there were a lot of things happening in Hong Kong at the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also had we got our new got a project at the time that was the Innovation Tower. Mm-hmm. It's now built, but it was it was a chance to sort of come to this side and also look at the Asia Pacific.
Let's say I think for a lot of people, I mean, everyone has a different answer on this. The common denominator is that people stay, but everyone has a different reason. What was your reason? Why did you come, and what sparked inside you?
Well, it was quite easy at the time for China, at least, because that was the biggest project anyone could have would have dreamt of or would have been able to do. It was the Guangzhou Opera House at the time. Mm-hmm. And early 30s. Early 30s. How many people can have a chance to actually work on a project, let alone actually have a real intensive hand on it. And when I was there, so it was a fast learning curve. It was an exciting time as well. Very exciting. I think what was happening in China at the time. I think a lot of people could sort of testify to that.
Yes, in this table we had until a few days ago the book by Chris, Beautified China, which have you seen it? Chris Provost.
Oh yes, of course, yes. I've seen that book. Yeah.
So actually, I managed to fish one out of Amazon. It was actually the last one available that I could find.
Right.
I bought it secondhand, a little bit overpriced, and I'm very damaged. But the book. So when
did you say overpriced?
No, it was it was like more than twice the recommended retail price.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because it was the last one. It was secondhand, but I wanted to take a look.
Worth every penny.
I think so, and I admire Chris, so I wanted to read a little bit about him before he came.
Yeah.
I thought it was a show of respect, so I bought it, and it was, it is nice. Now I'm very happy I have it at home to have this documentation of this amazing development that happened in China in the past 30 years. Talking with Ismael from Populous as well, he was saying, when I was in Spain, I was not doing anything exciting. Maybe, one lousy residential building or something like this. And then you come here and then budgets are big, projects are exciting. They're asking you to be cutting edge. And I
Sure.
totally understand. If I was an architect, Europe, especially as a young architect, Europe is terrible.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of historical as well, because I think when I went in sort of 2004, 2005, but I wondered, we wondered whether we were too late, because a lot of people were already, doing a lot of these towers in Shanghai and what have you. And I wasn't really the first, in our company. I think we'd already did some sort of concept, some early designs for Soho, China, and it was, a lot of people had sort of ran back to London, saying how horrible it was and how difficult it was, in China. So when I went back in the late, sort of 2004, 2005. It was quite surprising. It was actually, there's still a lot of room to do things, but I think it's mostly political. It wasn't so much like, of course, everything in Europe was kind of stifled, small projects or medium-sized projects, and these things take time, and in China everything was wild. It was quick, but I think more impressive was the scale of it that was being developed. It was that kind of political. It was more of a political vision for them to move forward, for everyone to move forward. And the thing that I think surprised me most about China was, despite what I knew or what I thought about China having this kind of rich, long history, and of course communism kind of washed a lot of that. But after the reform, after Deng Xiaoping, after that kind of opening up and the reform, they were the attitude is very progressive. Everybody's looking forward to something new. They were very open to sort of ideas and what have you. For us, I think it's been a success story. It still is a success story for us in China. I think maybe the designs from Zaha or our company at large now, it sort of maybe resonates with them, because I think the work, it isn't just, of course, there's the angles and the spaces and what have you, but I think it speaks to them with that kind of maybe that repertoire. Maybe it's more about landscapes. Like landscapes, mountains, rocks, and what have you. There's a kind of poetry that kind of works.
Yes.
With their thinking, and for us, that's kind of been good, I think.
Do you think, obviously now in the past 5 years, that that level of political support of big projects has slowed down a little bit? Do you see a second phase of that golden era? Or a silver era coming around the corner?
Well, I wouldn't say so. I think it's probably stabilized. It's at a point. It's at a point where I think we're not talking about things are progressing. Everywhere. Now we're talking about. The biggest thing is, people are talking about AI and softwares and hardwares. The products that are coming through, a majority of these are now not just made in China, but they're developed in China. They're designed and developed in China. There's a lot of authorship. Electric vehicles are giving a good run for the money. In Europe and the US.
Chinese electric vehicles are amazing.
Yeah,
and if there has been, in my opinion, and I'm not a friend of conspirations, but in my opinion, there was a coordinated media operation trying to, throw some dirt onto Chinese electric vehicle industry. And the truth is, they are very nice.
No, of course, yeah. I mean, it's objectively speaking. I mean, many things seem to be doing, there are a lot of these sort of brands, a lot of things that are quite, threatening, let's say the established
Yes.
status of many things in the West. I think it's the same with the service industry, because we kind of have to remind ourselves the amount of students that were, studying abroad, from China. If you go to Europe, there are a lot of sort of Chinese students there. They don't hang around there. A lot of will go back to China, and a lot will, they'll have a good position, privileged position to do to exercise their creative or intelligent freedom to develop these things. Same with architecture, I think. So I wouldn't say wouldn't say that it's going to reach that point where we see it again.
Yeah.
They may see something good out. They may see a benefit of having a foreign firm but I think they're quite objective. They know when there's a talent, whether they're wherever they're from.
Yeah.
They will use them. The only thing that we worried about is that they will only just want the idea and then they'll do the rest themselves.
Yes. I mean, they have a rich level of sophistication that was surprising for me. Like, I've been going to China, I don't want to say regularly, but every now and then since 2012 when I was living in Hangzhou. And there was a huge leap between 2019 and May 2023 when I went back again. But in terms of aesthetic refinement, I went to Chengdu, and there were bars and restaurants. I mean, not all of them, but some of them had an amazing taste. They had learned how to they have a way of reinterpreting heritage that, in my opinion, is remarkable, especially because what happened. There was a moment in which I don't want to get into anything political, so I'm trying to use an euphemistic way of putting it. But let's say at a certain point they erased part of their heritage. So one could think, how are they gonna pick it up? They have, and they have done it with a lot of taste, and they mix modernity with tradition. And I think that in my opinion, the pandemic has helped them to become more reflective. And now I think they appreciate certain things in life that normally are attached to foreigners. So I've seen that switch. I like China. I hope that the good vibe and positivism comes back again, and we will in Hong Kong. We will start having fun again when that happens.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good people there. There's a lot of fantastic people I know in China. Also some great talent as well. There's some great architects actually, really good up and coming talent over there in China. I think maybe still, they're a bit stifled in some areas, but I think comparatively they have a lot more room to run in terms of their creativity.
Yeah,
and that's quite, and I think on a very large scale, you can say that, you can say that, sure, for Korea. But then on the other hand, you've got countries or even regions, maybe Hong Kong is one of them, that's maybe a bit more burdened by the past success.
Yes.
And it is a bit of a burden. And that's why when you sort of compare the two, China's just really flying.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah, and speed. The speed is the one thing. It's just not just the scale, but it's the speed they do things.
I have a stupid theory about why they are so fast. Because they don't use email. So if they don't react to the WeChat messages, they're gonna forget. So they do things super fast.
Yeah, I think it's a culture. I think it's a cultural thing.
It is a cultural thing, but I think cultural thing then gets interpreted into products, and then products define people that use them. For me, it's the opposite. Like I like email because email is calm and I can manage
Or
it.
you can, yeah, it's still there. At least it's still somewhere on the computer.
And WeChat gives me anxiety like you cannot imagine.
No, you can't find them, and you can't find you can't find the
Anything.
message. There's no trail.
There's no trail. Yeah, I don't know. In any case, let me go back to you. You mentioned Zaha Hadid as Zaha. It slipped a couple of times, which let's say reveals a level of familiarity that I imagine you had with her working so long in the company. When she was with us, let's say, how involved was she with all the offices around the world? What was, let's say, the vibe, if you allow me, in a company like hers?
Well, she was a person. I think it's. I mean, sort of. Let's not forget. I mean, what you see now. We're a big company now. But when she did start, well, at least when I started, it was an office of about 12 people. This is in London, in an old Victorian school. One of the classrooms in a Victorian school. That was where her studio was. Surrounded by my story was that I really worked hard to try and get to work there, or even just have a chance to work there. But because I was quite mesmerized with the work at the time that just existed on paper.
Okay.
Paintings.
Yes.
Specifically. So before she was, let's say, famous, she was more of a cult famous. She was more of a cult figure, in academia, and she did a lot of teaching. There's a fascinating mystery about the work and the designs. It took us, too many of us, a while to sort of decode or see, the meanings of some of these sort of paintings. Or they're more expressive, but they do speak a bit much more. Before Zaha, I was more of a, you'd be surprised, but I'm more of a sort of Richard Rogers and Foster kind of guy. More rational. Yeah. I was more fascinated with mechanics, how things are put together. But with Zaha, when I discovered her in the library, when I was a student, second year student, it was kind of fascinating because it wasn't just the fact that it was unusual architecture, but it was, the images they suggested something that was more that it wasn't framed. And you can see in the buildings now, you can sort of understand it now. When you have an orthogonal, maybe more I can call, Cartesian kind of building. You can be in a space that's kind of static, like this space here. You have an orientation, you know where things are. But if you have if the walls are slightly tilted, your eyes drawn up, you're looking, the space changes. And you go further, if you blend the wall and the floor, the function also kind of changes. So it became sort of a fascinating kind of vocabulary in design. And for some of the spaces, it works. But I think what's more fascinating, I think as the more I work there, what's more fascinating is that actually there is a function that it can blur many things. It isn't just sort of like, some people talk about Zaha, about breaking barriers. It's not so much about breaking barriers. It's more about blurring, between one thing and another. It's rather than the black and white, there's a lot of gray space in between. So back to sort of working for Zaha, she was, it was an individual. And she had a lot of sort of, when she was on form, she was, she would make, she was smarter than a lot of geniuses that I'd known or met, and I've met a lot of, people, and she was, some of the ideas were just sort of bold, and it wasn't just bold, but it was also maybe off the wall.
Okay.
You know, when you approach a brief or when you approach an idea, when you have something, you know, I mean, her early work was that fire station that she'd built for Vitra, furniture company in that campus. So I saw that building as a student, and it was a fire station, looked nothing like a fire station. But then you kind of ask, you ask yourself, what should a fire station look like? Should it be red? Should it have a pole? It didn't do any of that, but it's kind of it opened the floor for a lot of sort of debate and ideas. Could we sort of break the mold and do something else that could actually improve things? And it may not always be, it may not always be the right thing, but it's certainly an interesting alternative. And I think as things go along, and as the more we experiment, the more we start to sort of sharpen our senses and tools and designs.
Yes, I have. So, I mean, it is when you have someone that is able to establish then a certain language based on such a different idea of the status quo it is remarkable. I am very curious about who is now, unfortunately, with her passing away a few years ago, who is now the carrier of that legacy. Because at the end of the day, Zaha Hadid Architects is still called Zaha Hadid Architects. Yeah. So who carries the flag still today?
Well, there's many of us, but the ringmaster, I would say, let's say the ringmaster is Patrick Schumacher. Mm-hmm. He was Zaha's right-hand man for many, many years. And I think he was the one who would have steered her to success. She was a free spirit, but he was more a bit sort of grounded, and he was more about sort of delivering, making these ideas into projects. Mm-hmm. But it was a great partnership because she would also, really sort of push him. They both sort of interrogate each other in terms of ideas. There's a lot of dialogue between them. So it was a good partnership. So Patrick is still steering us, and yeah, for better or worse, we're also a bigger group of people who've been with her for many years.
How many people work in Zaha Hadid Architects nowadays?
Oh, we're close to about 500 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And out of those 500, how many people do you reckon? This is, let's say, if you had to guess, how many people actually worked with her closely?
Oh gosh.
It's just
maybe
a curiosity.
a good. Actually, many of us. But maybe a good sort of 20, 30 people.
Okay.
20, 30 people who would have known her well, intimately.
Then, I mean, yeah, that's a good reply to the question. Yeah. There are many of you that obviously, if the rest of your colleagues share the passion that I perceive while you're talking about her, it's I see how you can continue on let's say doing works that respect a certain line.
It's a family. It's a family, and it's also I think a lot of people sort of make this sort of assumption that she's gone and things look different. She would not have done that. She would have not have done that. But no, it's like that's I think that's grossly wrong. Because when you have any designer, any architect, their own previous work, when they're still alive, when they're still around, they evolve dramatically. The paradigm shifts. With Zaha, it's evolved constantly. Her work doesn't stay stuck in one era. Yeah. She was always embracing ideas, technology, She would do things that are, you wouldn't think she would do circles, but she would do circles.
Yeah.
And it's the same with many architects. If you look at the old stuff from, Kengo Kuma now, for example, he does everything in wood. Is the master of wood. But if you look at the old stuff, incredibly different. Same with Frank Gehry.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I like the analogy of the family. It's like it's not like the grandchildren of a great man are radically different. They just evolve generation after generation. But it's natural that it's like this. One of the main reasons that let's say I was very keen about talking with you for was the recent finalization of the Henderson, which, let's say, I passed in front of it every day. It's one of the first things I see in the morning because I live in McDonald Road, so I take a taxi. I turn left on Kennedy Road and I see the back side of the skyline, and it's as if someone had blown a bunch of fresh air into Admiralty. So it makes me very happy. And then talking with Chris, he was extremely. He was an amazing advocate of the project because he was getting into details, the glass, the facade, this and that. I do have some questions about technicalities and challenges about actually the job side. But before that, I want to ask you something a little bit more human, because as per my knowledge, that plot of land was one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, in Hong Kong at the time.
Yeah.
How is the pressure of working on something like that? Does it affect you, or after a while you are used to that?
Well, it'd be wrong to say that we would spend I think we would take that or take other projects less seriously than that one because of an expensive plot of land. But we took that one very, very seriously. And that project was also spearheaded with my colleague Sarah. She's in Hong Kong, and Sarah's a great leader. She's a great colleague and a great friend as well. She's also been here. I think similar story. I think she was planning to be here for how long? I think 4 months, and now she's getting her permanent residency. And also, Kaloi. We've got some great guys on this project. I think there was a lot of hard grafting. We certainly kept our hands held with our clients. There were different teams, different management teams, different levels. I think it was maybe just a bit more daunting in the sense that we were working on a project with such prestige. Because it's an all-glass building. You can see it's also an all-glass building. And when we were selected to do it, it was based on an idea, a vision, the shape. The building was you can see the outlook it's quite rounded.
Yep.
It's the other thing you'll notice is obviously it's all made of glass.
Yep.
The entire facade is glass, and glass you can assume is probably one of the most difficult building materials to deal with. It's quite unforgiving. I say this all the time, but because with other materials, it doesn't, it behaves differently. With glass, you can squeeze it, but it will just break in your hand, without warning. There isn't that sort of, let's say,
there is
cracking
no
or it doesn't
deformation.
bend.
Yeah.
And there are also a lot of different technologies behind the glass. There's a lot of there's a lot of different sort of processes in glass, and this is just with flat glass. And in our building, we've got a lot of curved glass, and these panels are prefabricated. And if that tolerance doesn't meet, and if you're pressing it, you'd be wasting a lot of time, money, and it isn't good for the environment either.
No, it's true. Before we get to the facade, I want I will dwell on that a little bit. Let me go a little bit in chronological fashion. What was the briefing for the project at the beginning?
Well, Henderson Land wanted a high-end office building. That was clear from the start. They wanted a gem that was going to be designed by a foreign architect. They invited, a number of foreign architects, including us, including Foster's and MAD, and also a couple of Japanese architects as well. So I think they were, it is quite a special site. Not just the fact that it's in central, the central business district, and in that sort of that it's also exclusive in the sense that it's facing Charter Gardens, that park.
Yeah,
it's quite a unique sort of concoction. Location is great; it's just right between Central and Admiralty. It's within great company as well. Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank and Bank of China. So I think they were looking to, have a flagship building that represents the company's new era or vision. So I guess that's how it started.
Did they have, let's say, what was the degree of freedom that you had when it came to making, let's say, putting together the proposal?
I think ideas, for sure. I think we proposed multiple ideas. The level of freedom, I guess you can sort of almost measure in the sense that the kind of conversations, there were proposals that they'd come back and tell us this is too conservative. We want something a bit more, more rounded, or we wanted some interiors to be a bit more, they wanted us to push.
So the comments were going into that direction.
I would say so. It was something that was kind of fitting for what they wanted, and they wanted something special. That was quite clear.
When you're coming to a proposal, this is another curiosity that I have. Are you always 100% sure of? I imagine that there are certain technical challenges that then you're gonna find farther down the road. Do you solve all of them before, or you get the proposal and then you say, okay, I'll eventually figure it out later?
Oh no, we try to, they would be measured. There would be some measured ideas.
Okay.
If you want to put something out, at least me personally, you want to be sure that they can be delivered one way or another. And even if you put something out, they could ask you. They could ask you, okay, the next question is, what's that made of?
Yes, exactly.
What's that made from? Where's that coming from? How do you do that? Sure, the more things that we have in our portfolio, the more options or we can do it. I think the trickiest thing was probably the glass would have been the trickiest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw online that there was a partnership with a steel. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation. Steel? What was the steel? What was the manufacturer of the glass for the facade?
Oh, Sile,
not Steel. Yeah. Sorry. My bad. Very late, very long week. I'm very sorry.
You have to cut that one out.
No, it's fine. When I make a fool of myself, we leave it in.
Okay.
If when the guests, no. I have this rule. I think it's out of courtesy. In this type of conversations, there needs to be a certain level of asymmetry, meaning that everything must be forgiving for the guest and forgiving for the host. Otherwise, it's like, I get to do this every week, so I should not make mistakes. Sile. Right. what was so difficult about coming up with that facade?
Oh, well, the material itself, the glass, a bunch of things. We're also building an all glass facade in Hong Kong, one of the most sort of temperate climates. It's also exposed to, extreme winds, weather, typhoons.
Yep.
Fortunately, maybe less so in seismic, but definitely typhoon winds is one. And I think we did explore various different companies. We talked about Sealy, so we did explore various different companies. Some geographically closer. You might go with a German
Yep.
supplier when you can maybe try something closer in China. We talked about China earlier. But glass being as refined as it is, a material, we couldn't find somebody in China who could prefabricate the glass to meet the sort of the tolerance requirements that we wanted.
Did you find when Chris was here, he was going all around talking about how this glass was amazing. Where was this, let's say, a variation, a glass with specs, especially developed for this project, or there was something that you found and you could apply?
It was developed a bit further. It was a bit of both.
Okay.
I would say it was a bit of both.
Because even the color feels fresher.
Well, no, I think the color is, it's the color that's from the glass and it's from the coating, you selected. We did go through, different processes. And along the way, along these years, the clients were also very wise in how we dealt with some of these sort of minimizing the sort of margin of error, along the way. We did a lot. We requested different manufacturers to do a lot of mock-ups. Some of them were just visual, some of them were performing, and then performance-based. When I say performance-based, they need to sort of be able to see that they can be installed properly. We also did so not just for the glass, but the mullions, that the system could also fit together. So this is all sort of, let's say, making a pre-flight along this whole process. And this is all, let's say, done before even tender. And also after tender, you're also pushing the awarded contractors to do this again and do this, properly to show, the standards that we and also the clients or our clients expected.
I see. Regarding the actual shape of the building, was it done? I heard that it was done after the inspiration of a bauhinia flower, which it may be very well fitting. Is there? I'm an aerospace engineer. I ended up working in design by serendipity of life. Okay. So, but I still like certain to satisfy certain technical curiosities. How does the aerodynamics of the building work? Is it just the curvature of the building something that is meant for aesthetics, or are there aerodynamics, especially in a place that you have T10s coming once every 1, 2, 3 years? Was that something taken into consideration? I mean, I know you have some gains because you don't have the corners, but how did that impact? How did that impact that?
Well, I can answer by saying that every building you do, whether they're square, rounded,
you measure.
They would have to go through something, like a wind tunnel test.
But I would imagine that yours behaves very well in those tests.
It does, but I think it doesn't necessarily compute with, let's say, the building regulations.
Okay.
Because the building regulations, you're talking about something that's quite sort of, when you're talking about, let's say, technology, you're talking about aerospace industry. We can talk about automobile industry. Those thresholds are quite, those thresholds are very progressive.
Yeah.
Because you've got you have the consumer threshold. They need to sell as much of these or get them off the ground as many off the ground as possible. But there's also the safety threshold, with the automobile industry. So these things, they have a lot of different companies developing this, regulating things, so and the regulatory system matches that kind of the market in delivery. With the building industry, it's much slower, because at the end of the day, we're still talking about steel and glass.
Yeah.
Majority of buildings still works with, standard rectangular, regular sheets. There's a good reason for that, obviously. So, to have a building that, the building codes don't make a particular exception for something like this. So, so when it's assessed, the process is still the same, still the same as you would with any other building. It may, perform a bit better. Sure, the glass when it's curved structurally, it's a bit more, it's stiffer. But whether that's factored in, let's say the building regulations, maybe not necessarily.
I see. That was actually a very interesting question, by the way, because I was really curious. You mentioned before that one of the main things of the briefing was that Henderson wanted to have a high-end office space in the center of the financial district. And I would imagine that, especially now with the requirements of connectivity and comfort and so on, there are certain expectations when it comes to aiming to host companies like, Audemars Piguet, like Christie's, etc., etc. How is the Henderson special in this sense?
Well, I think maybe we could maybe start by sort of mentioning this sort of design repertoire that, let's say, Zaha Hadid has kind of imparted. There's in many, if not almost all of our projects, there is a certain respect for the public domain, so to speak. So, we have malls that are, we have buildings that even if they're closed, they're still open to the public 24/7.
Yes, I find that fascinating.
So
about this city.
Yeah. And I think, with the Henderson, the building, sure, we could have had a podium, a standard podium that's kind of like blocks off, and it's only open when it's during opening hours, so it's very exclusive to tenants. In this case, I think we did something a bit different, that we actually carved out the lower part. The building is actually lifted up, and I think when when you say how does this also respond to the surroundings as well? It's almost a direct response to Charter Gardens. It's almost try to suck in that nature into that sort of lower level, and then at the same time, it's curved out, so you can actually have a great view out.
Yeah.
So context-wise, it kind of brings about this as a sort of natural asset to the building. So it brings it improves this kind of like image on a sort of more social, monumental level. So that's a plus. And then I think, as a building hardware itself, the floors are very generous. The floor-to-floor height is about 5 meters.
Okay.
So the clear height, you've got about 3.5 meters. That's why it works great for Christie's. So it's able to function a bit beyond, a normal office tower. So it serves very well, for an auction house like Christie's, with that clear height. So there's that sort of blur between something commercial, but also something civic and a little bit more institution.
No, I understand. There is also the ingredient of the integration with the park at the ground floor, which is a space that it's a space of the job site that obviously you gave away. You said we're not going to build here. We're going to, let's say, let the building breathe. Was this something that was required let's say, by the Hong Kong government, or was it, let's say, a choice to integrate the
Yeah.
building in the surroundings?
Well, it was an interesting concoction. I mean, there is part of it, because there's all, where there is the bridges, the
Yes.
footbridges that, we could have just sort of left, or, but it was decided to, to be rebuilt and then sort of moved in. It was lifted up. I mean, there's some things are also client, from client initial brief as well. For maybe a good start is the position of the core, the service core, in the elevators and the services. So from the beginning, I think the clients wanted us to look at, consider having a building as a side core. So on the side away from the park, so you're actually maximizing the footprint towards the park. I think in hindsight, that was a great move. Not many developers in Hong Kong, especially, would probably go for something like that. But I think it was clear that the clients also wanted, I think they wanted something a bit more than just your conventional tower, because a central core, if you have a central core, that's much easier to organize, much easier to do the layout, smaller units, it's easier to lease. But with this one, having it on the side, it's frees up the floor plate, and it gives the tower something much more special.
Yes, I think that, I don't know. It makes from an ignorant point of view, it makes the building more gentle, and it's funny because when Ismail was here talking about the Kai Tak, he put a lot of emphasis on how much they care about making it something that would integrate into the surroundings. Maybe even 50-50 in their case. I mean, their case, this is a building for the city, so probably it's justified that they think so much about it. But in your case, even being a private building that is going to be used for commercial purposes, I think it's remarkable. I like it very much. Suddenly, the building, let's say, I think became loved by everyone. They call it icon amongst icons, which is actually quite justified. Could be justified because we are extremely spoiled in Hong Kong. We see great buildings all together every day. I want to ask you something that goes a little bit away from the Henderson. What other buildings do you find that are being done now or that have been done recently by other studios do you find remarkable? Do you especially enjoy?
Sure. Yeah. That's a very difficult question.
First thing that comes to your mind.
No, there's many. Because I must have a list of about 50,
50?
No, and, there's many. It would be wrong to put one.
Okay. Let's talk about it.
For many different reasons.
Okay.
And, I mean, if you talk about Hong Kong, if you talk about favorite buildings and what have you, there's, the Shanghai, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank is still classic.
Yes, I like that so much.
I mean, it's not the fact that it was, it's almost like a boy's toy, like the mech canoe and things, it's the guys that, the boys and the mechanics kind of like dream about. But it's just also, from architecturally speaking, it's ingenious. There's, who knew you could stack up, long span bridges vertically, and then on Sundays, it's that ground is freed up as a public space. It's still a gem.
When I was studying in the university, I came across a documentary about Norman Foster that it was called "How Much Does Your Building Weigh, Mr. Foster?"
Sure, yeah.
Which now the images are very low quality, but it was a very nice, storytelling.
No, incredible guy.
And they explained the story of the building. So when I came to Hong Kong for the first time, traveling backpacking by myself in 2012, one of the first things I went to actually see the place, and I was amazed. Just going inside in the escalator,
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
No, it's just because in answer to that, because it's just too much out there.
Yeah.
And if you just sort of dig into anything, of course, you've got the classics. You've got the classics. If you go to, with the masters, everybody loves, well, they're good for a reason. Corbusier with his, with what his vision for, a social, it's a social architecture, and you get Carlo Scarpa, the craft, if you like that. And even the ones that sort of comes after, that's kind of inherits their vision, and they do and interpret. This is so much out there. And if you go to places like Hong Kong is one thing, but if you go to anywhere in Asia, if you go to Japan, it's like it's like an architectural safari.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's true.
It's a lot. It's a lot of amazing things.
So let me ask you a question in a more impersonal way, so we don't have to pinpoint
Sure.
number 1, number 2, number 3. There is a lot of criticism by some people about the tendency, or at certain periods in big metropolis like New York, like Hong Kong, to create a skyline full of rectangular boxes. And if you had the power translated into, you are the owner of 3 plots of land in the Hong Kong skyline, what would you do with them? How are the buildings you would like to build, or how would you see the Hong Kong skyline develop? Because it's not going to stop now, and we will see more things coming up in the next few years.
I don't know. Might be.
It's $1 million question.
Hang on a minute. You're talking about.
I will
let's
open
say-
you a second beer just so you get inspiration.
Are you talking about fantasy spaces in Hong Kong?
Wherever you like. I don't care fancy. Choose wherever is, let's say, close to your heart.
What, somewhere that I think in Hong Kong should be?
You have 3 plots of land
Yeah.
in prime location. Let's say Admiralty, or
Yeah.
even on the other side.
Yeah.
Do you fancy a second one, David? All right. What do you do with those plots of land?
What do I do with the spots of land?
Yeah. What would you
If
build
it was
in
up
them?
to me?
Yeah. There you go.
Huh.
It's a fun question. It doesn't have all to be so serious.
No, many things actually. No, I think there's one thing I would. There is maybe one kind of project it would be nice to see happen.
Okay.
It wouldn't be. I think it would be good to see workshops. I mean, I am in. Architecture is one thing, but I'm also interested in the sort of the creative industry. I think Hong Kong lacks a creative industry because it lacks production.
Okay.
There was a time. I mean, I'm old enough to remember this. Maybe you are as well. I mean, there was a time where everything bore 4 little words. From clothes, cups, whatever. There was a time where everything was just all made in Hong Kong. I think you were, yeah.
I'm a little bit too young, yes.
You're a bit too young. So that's changed a lot. That's changed. Hong Kong still, we still see a lot of hope for the creative industry, design, and what have you. There's a lot of sort of questions to see. So why can't we sort of do more? I find it's quite difficult to just be sitting on sort of let's say design without actually creating.
Yes.
I think I'm quite an advocate for being hands-on. I would like to see sort of workshops, a bit like the ones that you see in sort of Copenhagen.
Okay.
In Copenhagen, you've got this sort of the institutions that are funded by by the state. You've got 4 different floors. I've mentioned this to people as well. You've got different floors, and you've got an entire floor dedicated to wood workshops, ceramics, metals, textiles, and it's open to whoever's interested to, from students down to professionals, whatever scale, to just go in and create and make stuff. And it's all fair and well to just be able to design and be stuck in front of a computer screen and press click and expect somebody to do it. But if you're kind of like, if there's a gap between design and craft, you're missing out, and that's and that's the thing that's kind of drives the ecosystem in Italy.
Yes, 100%.
In Japan, the designers, sellers, fabricators, they work together.
Yeah,
and they all work with different guys.
Yeah,
and you have an ecosystem. So I think there's talent here. I think there's tradition here as well. Maybe they would have had more of an advantage than China, in terms of the tradition. But China's catching up on all of this. It would be nice to see this, such a small place like in Hong Kong, to actually be able to do a bit more of that. And this would sort of help the sort of businesses and what have you.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of missing. And I think maybe also studio spaces. We've got a bit of a, I think a lot of people talk about the sort of high housing crisis and what have you in Hong Kong. But it would be nice to see a bit more of this sort of spaces for people as well, for production and also for creatives as well.
Yeah, it is true.
I think though, especially those who are just starting out, this is something that I think Hong Kong lacks when you compare it to the model that we might be used to in the West, or even certain countries that have more space. I think it's just more of an issue of land value.
Yeah, no, it is true. It is true. Like in a place in which, let's say, the land is not so scarce, people normally have a garage, or they have a place in which they can play around and come up with things. Factories can exist. At the end of the day, for design, factories are super important.
I mean, it can be done, but I think it's just that when you're, I think when you're a student in a place like Hong Kong, as soon as you graduate, you're under more pressure to get a stable job.
Yeah, here there's a city in which I agree with you. It pushes you to be in finance, and if you are not in finance, then you do the second best thing, and if not, you try to survive.
Yeah,
and there is not the say I'm going to explore my inspiration.
So for those who want to sort of maybe compete or do something exciting in sort of that sort of sector, it's kind of a bit missing.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, there's funding from certain institutions, but I think it's not. I think it's just missing a bit of some of the hardware.
It also takes time. And it's a matter of the zeitgeist and a lot of different dynamics. We talk about Italy. Italy, at the end of the day, was convergence of many different factors.
Yeah,
money from the Plan Marshall, which funded a lot of things. Creativity and drive of Italian businessmen, and then in the case of Italy, the fact that young architects couldn't get any work, so they started designing stuff. So there were a lot of talent who couldn't get jobs, factories with very bold entrepreneurs, and then they created something. But again, I think this is a city that has the drive. And at the end of the day, that's what makes it, makes this flavor, this patina of old, which means that people want to stay here. I want to stay here. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna stay 30 years because I arrived here later than you, but
No, it's a great place. There's a lot of things we'll probably take for granted as well.
yes, 100%.
It's the little things that we just take for granted is so, we 25% of Hong Kong is developed. You've got all this green around it.
Yeah, I always
People are talking about sustainability. It's already one of the most sustainable cities in the world, despite the paper thin walls and what have you. But it's great transport system, safe.
very safe.
Yeah,
You have a lot of parks.
you have a lot of parks. I feel like I'm speaking as someone from the tourism board, but
No, but it is true. Look, I'm gonna be very, very, very frank with you. In 2000, look, in the past 3 years, there has been an exodus of my friends. Not only my friends, many people's friends. I think I lost at least 80% of my very good friends. So at that point, I asked myself, should I stay or should I go? Like the song.
sure, yeah,
And so I consider other places. Like I actually say, should I go to this place? Should I go to that place? And in my case, there is no place better for me, for my age, for what I want to do, for the fact that here you find people that it's not only about. I think that places create things. This is my theory. I'm not like Dubai Tourism Board either. But for example, if there was not this office, this podcast wouldn't happen. If the Hong Kong didn't bring the driven people, I wouldn't have met David and we wouldn't have made such a good podcast. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say this, but I think it's a good podcast. Thanks to David.
so we giggle.
A second beer is. I think we are doing enough by hanging on. No, but it's true. But it's true, and I am enamored about this. We are just a little bit depressed. We need to get. I don't know. We need to get used to a slightly different rhythm, and we'll be fine.
We're fine.
We'll be fine. After you finish a project like the Henderson, which I imagine
It's not finished.
I mean, it's almost finished.
It's almost finished. Yeah,
But
it's finishing.
from your point of view,
Yeah.
do you dedicate any time?
My colleagues Sarah and Cologne are deep in it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for example, but I imagine you feel like you're, if not at the finish line, very close to the finish line.
Oh yeah.
How is that? Is that a good feeling or a bad feeling? What happens for an architect? Is there one day in which you say to yourself, "I'm not gonna think about this anymore"?
I'm sure Sarah's thinking about this a lot, but I think for generally speaking, it's a strange feeling. It's a strange feeling when you finish a project. It's not. I wouldn't. God, gotta watch what I say. It's not like. I was gonna say that it's almost like you're cutting off a limb and you still feel it's there, kind of thing.
I believe that.
Not that I know what that feels like, but
No, I mean today I told you today is my last day in one job, and it feels super weird.
you know what I mean, yeah. So
That 2 hours ago I finished a work that I have been doing for more than 4 years.
sure.
So I can imagine. In your case, as in a breakup with a person, do you have something else to go to, or let's say, what are you working on right now?
There's another 2 that's finishing off.
Are you doing the West Kowloon?
No, that's a
apartments?
couple of colleagues are doing that.
Okay.
We have another team doing that in Hong Kong. Yeah, my colleagues Ed and Bianca. A little shout out for them. I'm doing another one in Shenzhen at the moment. Science Museum, that's finishing off. We also did one in sort of the Sai Kung area towards Mao Shan. sort of a commercial sports center for our clients at San Hong Kai.
Mm-hmm.
That's also finished. Yeah, and then we're at the same time we're doing some work in China.
So you are still busy.
Still okay. Yeah,
It's still okay.
Still okay.
It's still okay.
Yeah.
Very, very good. I enjoyed a lot talking to you, Simon. I hope you did as well. And if you didn't, at
Is
least
this it?
And it's
I'm just joking.
I don't know. I don't even know how long, because 1 hour and what is that? 50 or 5? 1 hour and 10. Sorry.
I think David, you can talk now, David.
He has two mics.
He's too shy.
He's saving himself for the last episode of the season. He promised me he's going to be there.
Okay.
I'm trying to force him to be there. No, we can continue. I have a.
I can continue all night.
My friend Cesare just brought me a bottle of Mamarone, so we have champagne and everything here. This is the best office. It's small. I don't think anyone can do more with 450 square feet. We have a very, 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 say, six
Feels
desks.
bigger.
Feels bigger, eh?
Yeah, it feels bigger.
You know who the designer was? Me. No. It is honestly.
I'm not laughing.
Honestly,
Why are you laughing?
It was me. It was me.
Yeah.
It was me, but with the help of Amy Compagne, which I have to thank you, because I wrote on a paper and she actually made the drawings for the contractor. So thank you very much. She used to work at the Foster and Partners. And we used to share an office in Wongshu-han a few years ago. She's cool. She's from Ibiza, which makes her even cooler.
Yeah.
We can have the beer and we can talk without recording. But
Can do, yeah.
But I still, you interrupted me. I was thanking you for actually being a very interesting guest and having, let's say, you distill knowledge of what you do, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to sort of like overreach or
You know, talking to you, I know why Jacine, hello Jacine, spoke very highly of you.
Oh, really?
Because-
Okay.
Yes, he did. So I don't think I'm revealing.
I think very
any-
highly of you.
I don't think that I'm revealing anything that is secret. I think that, let's say, being humble is a very good trait. And normally, I think the level of how humble is a person is inverse proportional and how knowledgeable and talented they are.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if normally people that they don't know shit, we haven't swore in the whole conversation, so that's me. Normally people who don't know shit, they are very arrogant. And people that know a lot normally are very kind.
Interesting.
It's inverse. I don't know. A theory.
I think
that
it's probably true.
I think it can work. Yeah, I think it can work as a theory of all. In any case, I am really thankful that you came. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
David, did you like the podcast?
Thank you, Fernando.
Yes. Thank you for, as always, for being here. And for every one of you who made it to the end of the podcast, I appreciate you even more. We publish this on a Friday, and we are actually now on a Friday. So be happy like us. Crack up a beer open or wherever you like to drink, and be happy. Enjoy. Love everyone. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye. And there we go.